It's very nice to be here. Okay, yeah, so thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about asynchronous programming. I have a number of talks about AsyncAwait, asynchronous programming in Dart and Flutter. You can find them in my Twitter feed. The best place to find them is, or you can Google. But my other presentations were more towards beginners, and Yevgeny told me that this would be, more advanced, audience. So I cooked up a brand new talk, and the idea of the talk is that I devour the depths of Stackoverflow, so you won't have to. So I've been in Stackoverflow answering questions for a while now, and I try to focus on Flutter and AsyncAwait. So I'm almost hitting 6,000. I'm proud of course, a lot of people are much more than that, but I try to answer a lot of AsyncAwait Flutter questions, and over time, I came across some patterns. And before this talk also, I went through the popular posts and tried to find cases where people are having issues with. Even for beginners, this would be very useful, I hope, because you see what other people are running into, and you'll try to understand. Because the definitions are okay. Yes, you read this is how it works, docs, etc. But when it comes to the actual doing the programming, we are human and we are pulled towards different ideas. And I'll try to show you what other people run into, and you may also run into, and how you should behave in those situations. Hopefully, this will be like a AsyncAwait by example, what people in Stackoverflow run into a lot. So let me talk about myself very briefly. I see in chat before that I took books about learning Dart. I didn't learn it from a book, so I don't know, but I learned it from the official docs, which I'll also talk about now. So I am from Turkey. I'm joining you from Turkey. I'm also GMT +3, so Moscow time is Turkey time also. And after graduating from university in Turkey, ODTÜ, I went to the United States, got my PhD there, went to Google for a summer, became an intern there in Google Irvine. That's how I got to know Dart. Before Dart was released, I got to play with it, with its very early version. And then I came back to my country. Now I'm an assistant professor in Izmir University of Economics engineering faculty. And I also have my own company. We are developing Flutter applications. So I'm very much practicing what I teach. Yeah, and I learned Dart that way. We are using Flutter in my company, and I have 3 employees. Shout out to them. And we are, developing Flutter applications for people around the world. And yeah, so something that we see often, since I'm teaching for like 3 or 4 years, I'm actually teaching Flutter in a college university course. So I think I'm the only one in the world. And I'm pretty much sure I'm the first one in the world. So I've seen a lot of students learning about it. I also try to answer Stackoverflow questions. So I see a pattern, right? So people say, I want to learn Flutter. And they say, oh, AsyncAwait, they just figure it out enough to, get their day pass by. And then they have all kinds of issues with it because they didn't learn it fully, right? They say, oh, Flutter is hard, it's weird, etc. So what's all this future AsyncAwait stuff? How should we use them in practice? That's the idea. So why do we even have them? Well, the reason we have them is Dart is running on a single thread. Flutter has only one thread that you're running code into, unless you create isolates, but by default it's a single thread. But it is a very fluid application, so it's kind of unexpected. You would think there would be a screen thread, UI thread, some separate threads you would be writing, but it's a very fluid. It responds very fast to your touches, but it's also doing things that take time, like going to the cloud, going to the file system, etc. And it maintains this 60 frames per second as much as possible. So it's done via having the whole code, the whole framework, and the whole standard library and the language very much async aware, asynchronous aware. Things are happening, things that take time. You are doing other things in the meantime. And in my other talks, I talk about it. For beginners, I very much like a cartoon. I explain with a date spoiling scenario. You go to a mall, etc. But you can watch those for that. Here, I kept something from those talks, though. I want to talk about how exactly it works, because there is something called magic code in computer programming, learning of computer programming. you say, oh, something like that happens around those lines. I'm not sure. Don't touch it. Pray and let it work, right? If you have that, then you're going to run into all kinds of issues. So here I try to de-magicify the situation and tell you how exactly it works with the single thread. So we learned programming, right? When we learned programming, they told us, oh, line by line execution. After one line completes, then the computer goes to the next line, and that's how it goes. The thing here is, without finishing this line, it cannot go to the next line. So the next line cannot execute. So if one of these lines takes a long time, the line after that waits for until it is done, right? So this is the main axiom, our basis that we're basing everything on here. So in Dart and in Flutter, we have an event loop, and in our event loop, we have a bunch of functions that we are writing and giving them to the framework, right, in our app. And there is in the event loop, in the framework, in Flutter, there is a function that refreshes the screen, right? So this is when you touch and then you pull down, it scrolls. How does it scroll? It redraws the screen, and it has to come to this function to redraw the screen. If your function takes a long time and it doesn't let the computer, doesn't let the processor go to that function that refreshes the screen, it's going to freeze, and you're not going to have a good time as a user, right? So here I try to explain it. So in the event loop, all kinds of event functions, button press, whatever, you switch to another state, some kind of function executes that you wrote. So we wrote this function, it executes, it returns, and then the main thread, the single thread, has time to go to this function that refreshes the screen, right? It goes there, and then it updates the screen, redraws it, so I see it move up with my finger, which is nice. I'm happy as the user. So this happens 60 times a second, this loop. So sometimes in our functions, we do things that take a long time, like a large download or something like that. Even small downloads take some time. They're not instantaneous. So in some frameworks, it could be that, oh, I'm going to hold this thread hostage here until the download is finished, so I can use it in the next line. But in Flutter and Dart, we don't do that. We use futures. You can think of futures as this buzzers, pages that they give you in restaurants. In my other talks, I talk about it a lot. So they give me the buzzer instead of giving me the hamburger. Instead of giving me the download, they give me a future object, which they will say, okay, this will buzz when the download is ready. And so, okay, and they also say, okay, when it's done, so notice this line 5 here, when you have the result of it, you will execute this line. So we take it to another function. So we cannot execute it right now because we will use the result of that download. And so that's line 5. The function is attached to this future, to this buzzer. And say, okay, we're fine. We know that function will execute when download is complete. Let's go with our journey, keeping the buzzer in our hand. Download didn't finish yet, but we get to refresh the screen still. So this is how it works with a single thread, these things that take time. So after a while, there is also, I didn't show, a function that continues unfinished tasks, right? Unfinished tasks such as this one, such as this download, right? So the single thread needs to be able to go there to continue this. So when the time comes, when the download is finished, when my thread arrives at that function that continues unfinished tasks, it says, oh, this future has finished. So, and what's your function? What's your .then? It asks the future. It says this one. So it goes there, executes that, and comes back. So this is exactly how it works. I mean, in a simplified way, but exactly. There is no magic code involved. So at some point this happens. I'm not saying that. I'm exactly saying, believe this, and then you will resolve a lot of async issues that you're having. Okay. So single thread, as you can see, there was only a single thread that went around all this stuff, and we were able to continue our long-running task after a while. Okay. So downloads take a long time, but also file system operations take a long time. So if your framework lets you write synchronous file system operations, your frame rate will suffer. And in Dart and Flutter, even file system operations are all async, so they don't let you hog this single thread, which is a very valuable resource. Okay, because reading a file, if I'm making up 10T, event loop is T 60 times per second, so you lose a lot of frames if you actually stop for the file system operation. So you also do that asynchronously. Okay, So I just wanted to tell you that just to refresh your memory about how it works, because if you know that animation by heart, you can watch it multiple times. When you have an issue with async, you can watch it again. You will resolve a lot of your issues. And here is how async code works. So on the left, we have a int get val returns 1. And in my main function, I just call it, I just print the result. Very basic, very mundane code. On the right is its future version, so using the future object. So instead of get val returning a 1, it returns a future object. I'm creating it manually here. This could be like a download the 1 and then give it to me kind of thing. So this function returns a future object, that buzzer, and it's here. And I say, okay, when you're complete, do this, please. And then I continue with my life, right? So that's the line 5 that we added to buzzer, this function. So this is how asynchronous programming can be implemented in any language, really. But in the middle, you see the middle one looks like on the left, but it actually works like on the right. So the very simple synchronous sample, we just add async to the functions, and then it returns 1, as you can see again. It doesn't return a future. The system wraps it the async wraps it in a future object for you, returns it here, and when you use await on it, you get your value back. So this under the hood runs exactly like this. Exactly this executes. But as a user, as a programmer, you get to write code that is like this one on the left. So for beginners tutorials, you can watch my other talks. There were others. You can also send me a message on Twitter. I can send you the links, but I have a number of talks for very beginners. Yeah. So this one looks like on the left, but it acts like on the right. So AsyncAwait is great. So we don't want to deal with futures directly. We want to be able to deal with them using AsyncAwait, okay? Because then we get to write code that looks like synchronous. Okay, so this is great. And also streams, there is also concepts of streams. This is for multiple values instead of single value like future. With streams, the cool thing is instead of for, we get to write await for, which looks like very much for, but it actually does a stream listen for you and like multiple other things, handling the breaking of stream, etc., automatically for you. So this is but we're not going to talk about streams much today. We're going to work with futures mostly. So let me look at the chat. Your opinion on using await try catch using functional way? Fine, functional more unclear. Yeah, functional. You mean like giving like dot for each, and you give a function? Yeah. It has its usages, but it creates some bugs, which I'll talk about in the upcoming slides also. But feel free to ask specifics. Yeah, and then at the end, I can come back to the questions one more time. So what I want to remind you is this is not multi-threading. So this is our first Stackoverflow link for today. So this is not multi-threading. Remember, there was only one thread guy that was walking around in this blue path, and there was no two guys going at the same time, and he wasn't jumping around. He was like following a clear path. He wasn't jumping to here and there, multiple things he wasn't doing. So a byproduct of this is that other tasks cannot execute if you don't let go of the execution. If you don't let go of this guy, if you hold him hostage here, these things won't be able to execute. You won't be able to refresh the screen. You won't be able to continue other unfinished tasks. Okay, if I hold it hostage here, he's not going to be able to continue other asynchronous stuff that I had started. Okay, and this is an actual Stack Overflow question that I answered. And this guy is trying to figure it out, which I was also trying to figure it out when I first saw. This is me when I first saw AsyncAwait. So what is he doing? He's saying, okay, I will create a future. After 1 second, it's going to set my flag to false. And I will wait for that flag. I'll write a while loop. I'll keep increasing my count. And I hope that after 1 second, it will be set to false. So I get out of this while. Makes sense, right? If this was threads, it would make sense. And I applauded this guy for, trying things out like this, because I was also doing that. And he's actually trying to understand it. But this is not how it works. The problem here is it is trapped in this while. Okay, so this guy is trapped in a while. And he cannot go to here to continue this future.delayed. Okay, so this future.delayed, we need to be able to go to the event loop and come here so that the future delayed continues and calls this function. Okay, so the single thread is trapped here. It never executes. It doesn't work. Okay, so this is, and my suggestion was, let's create another this is the future that stops it. This was his original future, and I created a loop in another future, in another async task. Here is a async function that I have, and I'm calling it immediately. It is running in another async task. This is async task. This is an async task. So then they work nicely. And here I'm doing await at every loop. Okay. With the help of this await, we are letting go of the execution so it can arrive here. So you need to have awaits if you have a long-running code. If you have a loop or something, you need to have awaits to let the execution go to other places if needed. And then I do a future wait on both of them, so that this main function doesn't return immediately, but you wouldn't have to do it in something like Flutter possibly. And then printing the count, and I was able to get it to 215 with this idea. So this is one of the things, when you first meet AsyncAwait, you try things like this, and then you say, oh, this is how it works. It's a little different than threads. Async is contagious. So another Stack Overflow question. So this Günther, I like him so much. So he was one of the people that taught me in this stuff in Stack Overflow. He's a really nice person. So he says, yeah, async is contagious. So what does he mean? I have an example here. So I hope I don't get too excited. Okay, so this is main, right? I hope you can see it. Maybe I can. No, I think you should be able to see it. Yes, it's large enough font. So we have a main function. I have a play with posts. I have a post class. I have a function that plays with posts and plays with something else later. Let's see what play with posts does. I do control click or command click, and you see what I do down here. So I'll also try to show some IDE features. So I'm playing with posts. I'm doing load posts. So as you can see, this is synchronous. What's load posts? I'm just creating one list of one post for now as a test. But later I will do it with HTTP. And I process these posts, print post count, blah, blah. I do stuff with these posts, and then I get back. So this is all synchronous code. I process the posts, print the post count, and I do a while loop. I add process to every post title, and I print those posts, and I say print done with posts, and then after that play with something else later, just the print. Okay, so I have load posts here. Okay, it was all synchronous code. There was no async or no futures. And as a person who's playing, okay, I will get the posts, do it like this. I started writing some code. Now the rubber hits the road. Okay, let me get the posts from the internet then. I was just getting them as a list. Let me download them from the internet. What am I going to have to do? This is going to, this is going to be an asynchronous task, right? Not a synchronous one, because I'm doing an HTTP call. It gets me a future, right? So you can imagine creating this line like this. I assign value to new local variable, and what is this? It's a future. So let me get back. When you put an await in front of it, instead of getting the future, and let me assign this to a variable. What is it? Oh, it's an HTTP response. Great. So let me play with it. So this is my approach. I have a function that I call. If it returns me a future, I check it with the IDE. It does return me a future. I put an await in front of it. So you should use the types, return types. I like to type my variables also, so I see what I'm dealing with. This could have been a final also, but then I couldn't say if it was a future or not. For a while, I would eventually say, of course, but I like it this way because I'm an old Java programmer. So, so this is an asynchronous thing, and it returns the posts as a list inside this future because it's an async code. Okay, so what's going to happen now? Okay, load posts is called from here. Oh, I have a red underline. A value of future cannot be assigned to list. So whenever you have this, it means that you have a list something is equal to future. So you change the order of these things. Whenever you have such a value of cannot be assigned, you change the order. On the left, you have a list. On the right, you have this one. You're trying to put this one into that one. So this means that, I have to await this one, right? But I cannot await because this is not an async function. I have to hit add async modifier. Yes, great. play with posts is async now. But this is here. So let me run the first version, and then let's see the last version. So I will run this. We have this many posts, one process done with post. Now that we're done with post, let's do something else, I say. Okay, after I did all that I showed you, what's the problem here? Play with posts is async. I'm not awaiting that. And let's see what's going to happen with that. It immediately says, now that we're done with them, let's do something else. And then it downloads the other posts from the internet. So this was supposed to happen at the end, not at the beginning. Okay. Why did that happen? Because play with posts got called. This just initiated this async function, and then it didn't wait for it. Therefore, this printed immediately. So this has to be awaited. This is returning a future. Await. Oh, I'm in the main function. I cannot do async. So even main function can be an async. The moral of the story is here. So your main function is the entry point of your application, or your even Flutter or Dart command line application. And here you see we have this many posts, we have them. And then now that we're done with posts, let's do something else, okay? So this is, people run into this a lot. Oh, why did that happen immediately? Why is my list empty? I was inserting things into the list. Because you didn't wait for it. That's why it happened. So you have to wait, but to be able to await on it, you have to make your main async as well. Or you could do that then, but I don't like to do that. So this is a better approach. Okay, so async is contagious. So what can you make async? What can't you make async? So we just made main async, right? We just converted the main function to async. This was a surprising thing for me when I first saw it. Well, how was it before? It was void. Now it's future void, right? It's not returning anything. It's just returning a future now. It wasn't returning anything anyway. Nobody cares probably, right? So that's the idea actually. If it's a function whose return values are void or ignored, then you can make them async. And they shouldn't also be overridden functions. Okay, so it's not an overridden function. Its return value is either void or it is ignored. It's not used somewhere, then you can make it async as you want. So button, click handlers, things like that, you can make all of that async if you want, because its return value is not used. You cannot make async functions whose return values are used, such as builder functions. For example, the future, the builders of the plain builder function, the builder of navigation, things like that. There are a lot of builder functions in Flutter. You cannot, because their return values is a widget, so you cannot make them async. Because you have to return it immediately. The screen is waiting for this build function to give it a widget so it can put it on the screen. You cannot say, oh, wait for 5 seconds, let the user freeze, and I'll give you the build widget later. You cannot do that. So the return value is used, so you cannot make it async. Overridden methods, you cannot make them async. This is just a language feature, and it makes sense because init state has to complete before the first build. So it cannot wait. The build cannot wait for you. You have to see it immediately. Also, you cannot make the set state, the function you give to set state, you cannot make it async because its return value is, again, I guess, used in set state function. So for example, what do I have here? Yeah, count posts, for example. I have a count posts function, which is just returning an int. And its return value is used, right? Can I make it async? Let's try. I made the count posts async, and then immediately I have an underline here. Argument cannot be converted to int. So without changing the code that uses it, I cannot make it async. Okay, that's the idea. So maybe this was not my code. Maybe this was framework code, such as the builder, etc. They are calling me. They are calling this function. And if I make it async, I'm returning something else to them. So this breaks things. So I cannot make my function async. In Flutter, the main function, you can actually make the async. You have something it's a little different. In Flutter, you have the run app to enter the Flutter application, right? So run app is a synchronous function. This is the one that starts up the visuals, right? So if you make it async, you make it wait. You make that wait. It could be possible, yeah. I didn't try it, but it doesn't. People don't do it, to be honest. So run app has to execute. inside your widgets, you do that stuff. Maybe that was the digression, but nice questions. I like the interaction. Yeah. Okay, so these are the things that you can and cannot async. And my suggestion from me is a lot of Stack Overflow questions. If you mix async and then, right? So this is async code, and this is then code. This is just using the future directly. This is not using the future directly. This is using the future through await. So don't mix them, is my suggestion, because then you have a .then, and let's see if I think I had a link about it. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did have a Stack Overflow link, but I forgot to put it here. But you can find a lot of questions like that. If you mix them, then also returns a future. So what happens when becomes really confusing. So it's a really like a big puzzle for me when I find a question like that in Stack Overflow. I was like, okay, let's do this, and then crack my fingers. So don't do that. Especially if you're a beginner, you don't want to be in that situation. My advice is be brave. So why do people do this? Yeah, so this is the, can I guess I can't, but I can go to this one. Yeah, this is that code. Sorry. So my advice here is be brave, right? So you know that this is same as this, right? Why do people mix then and async? It's because they have a then code somewhere they found from Stack Overflow, let's say, and they have an async code somewhere. Maybe they created, maybe they found from Stack Overflow. They are trying to put them together. And then one has then, one has await. They put it together. It does work if you do it very carefully, but then you run into all kinds of issues. So therefore, so I know why you mix it, because you found some code, you don't want to change that code. It works, don't touch it. You're in that situation. But you have to be brave in that situation. So you have to convert that to AsyncAwait and then merge the codes. And believe me, it's going to be much easier to continue with, okay? So my advice is be brave. Convert the thens to AsyncAwait and then try to merge codes. Don't be left in a situation, because after you merge, it becomes even more difficult to, get the stones out of the rice, we say in Turkish. Okay, so know what you have, let the IDE tell you types, is another suggestion of me. So remember earlier I was using the types. I was writing lists, posts, I guess, where did I? Yeah, for example, HTTP response. I could have left it with a final or var, but then, yeah, this gives me an error, etc. Maybe for a beginner, they can be confused. They can print this. It says a future. Why is it not giving me a response instead of giving me a future? So you can prevent all of that by using the types. So when you have a final or var, you can always do Alt-Enter, Option-Enter, add type annotation. Then you see the type annotation, HTTP response. I prefer this because when you look at the code, you know what type they are. If it's very clear, when you look at here, if you are very clear about the type, then fine, you can use final. So for example, final I is equal to 5. Yes, this is an int, I know that. I don't have to type int here. But when it's some other code that returns this to me, I want to know, going along, what the type of it is. Otherwise, this is a source of bugs for a lot of people. So is this returning a future? Is it a list of posts, etc.? Just hit Alt-Enter and add type annotation. That will help you. Okay, so another very often ran into issue, event handlers inside async. You don't wait for them, it goes on independently. So an example was here. So he is creating a query, and then he says query on value listen. And then in that listen, he's adding stuff to user jobs and then returning the user jobs. What happens here? What he's doing here is just attaching a handler, listen handler, event handler to this query stream, or it could be anything. Attaching an event handler to something. That's going to spawn things when they come in the future, when they happen in the future. But this function attaches it, returns. And user jobs is empty list. This function returns empty list. Okay. So because this doesn't wait for things to arrive, and how does it know when the last thing arrived, right? So it doesn't make any sense. But people do write code like this. It makes sense when you're writing it to you, but when you look at it closely, then you realize what the issue is. I'm not the answer of this one, but yeah, he correctly fixed it for him. So the idea here is you don't wait for it, it goes on independently. And I think I had keyboard events for that, or for each. Yeah, I had keyboard events for that. Yeah. So the nice thing in Dart is you can get your keyboard events as a stream, or you can have any kind of sources of events. I'm just using this keyboard here. So I have a main function, and I'm saying await print keyboard events. Okay, so and then in my print keyboard events, I'm doing exactly the same thing what he does, right? He was doing this. He was doing listen to something, and I'm also saying listen to something. What am I doing? I'm just attaching it and then returning, and then it will say already done. So if we run this, it said already done immediately. And yes, I do enter things, but it did say already done. It shouldn't have said I wanted to wait for this thing. So how can I do that? Well, so I could do something like this. I did write some code below. So you can create a completer, and completer is a way to create a future for you. And then in your Stream subscription, notice that it's the same. I still have a listen here, which returns a Stream subscription, so I could break it in the future. But I have a listen here, right? In the listen, I'm doing the same thing. I'm again attaching, but in it, I'm completing this completer when nothing is entered. And then I'm awaiting this completer's future, which means that this will await on this line until this executes. So I am actually waiting for these events this time. Okay, so this is a fixed version of it, and I'm also canceling my Stream subscription, which you should do normally. So let's try this one. So I created it in advance because while talking, writing code like this can be tricky. So I'm writing things. As you can see, I'm using a Dovera keyboard layout. Anyway, so if I hit enter, it's only length 1. Done, complete happened, and then this line continued, Stream subscription got canceled, and then it said already done. This awaited function could return then, right? So this is one way to fix those things. So if you have no other option, if somebody gave you a function, hey, give me a function, I'll call it for you. With streams, it's not the case, but there could be those cases. And you only can call a function. I think with images, something like that was there in Flutter. If you only give a function to be called, then this is one way to say, okay, the function calls me, let me continue after certain thing. The alternative, a much simpler alternative, is this await for. If you have a stream, in this case, we have a stream. In my slides, I talked about await for very briefly. I have a stream. I'm await foring on the stream. This is just like a for loop, as you can see. So check this code, check this code. This is just like a for loop that you're used to, right? What is await for? Because this is a stream, it gives me an item. Items are lists of integers, and I print them. If it's like 1, I break from this loop. So this is amazing, right? You do a for loop on a stream. When you try to write socket programming, for example, this comes into very much use. Exactly works the same way, but much simpler. Okay? So try to do this. If you have streams, just do await for. If you don't have streams, but if you have some other thing that says, oh, you'll just give me a function, I'll call it, no questions asked, I cannot give you a stream future, etc., then you can have this approach with the completer. You say, call me, I'll deal with your crap. Yeah. So, which as for a beginner, it's a nightmare, but once you have this pattern, it becomes much easier. Yeah. So on the same vein, async and iterable for each. So there was a question about functional programming, right? Like dot for each, etc. You like it, but it sometimes creates issues in multiple screens. Yeah, it sometimes creates issues with async code if you're not careful. So let's see what this guy is doing. So he gets something. He says that for each, and then in the for each he does a then, which could be an await also. So in the for each, he does things that take time. And then he says, I'm adding stuff to my list. Why is my list empty? Sounds common, right? Or maybe something like that. Yeah, so why is my list empty probably? It's because you are starting these, like for each is calling this function for each element one by one. And for each element called, it starts a Firebase operation. It just starts though, it doesn't wait for it. And then it returns and then it goes on. You still have an empty list. These will happen in the future, this .then part, okay? So I think I had something like this here. Yeah, so I have a list of words. If I do for each to them, and I'm posting them to the server, let's say, which will be just a delayed thing. And so my goal is to, I have the words, I'm posting them to server, and I'm forming a sentence out of them. And then after that, I'm printing the sentence. So when I start this one, what was I thinking here? I remember now. The sentence is empty. I'm kind of surprised too, because yeah, I know I created this code, but yes. Why is the sentence empty? Because this for each starts these jobs, and those jobs, it will take some time for them to get the sentence plus, but for each starts and returns and then prints the empty sentence. And then later, if I wait here a little more, then I'll see the sentence formed up, right? So that's the issue. So this .for each, especially if you put async stuff in it, it can be a nightmare. So how do we fix it? The easiest way, just a regular for loop. So let me comment that out. Right, regular for loop and do your stuff in it. This is usually the antidote. There should be a space here. But yeah, I cannot await. My main needs to be async now. Yes, so now I have the sentence. Another option, do I have my cheat sheets in the size? Yes, future.wait. Future.wait waits on a list of futures, an iterable of futures for all of them to complete, right? So I'm spawning multiple things here. I need to wait for all of them to complete, right? So how can I do that? Let me do it here so I can copy it easily. Future.wait. So I need to give an iterable of futures to this one. How can I create an iterable of futures? I can do words map, right? Execute this exact same function for each of them, this async function, which will return a future for each of them. Yeah, comment. Right, so this word map word async, this gets every word, starts something for each of them, and then as I have a list of futures in my hand, and I'm waiting on all of them, and then hopefully this will work for us. Is empty. Yeah, I have to await on what it returns, right? I'm also starting this and not awaiting on it. And, the second there, oh my God. Yeah, so this will become a sentence appear because I'm awaiting on this thing, which awaits on all of these futures, which I'm spawning one by one. And I'm spawning them in parallel, as you can see. I mean, spawning them in parallel. And if I have like thousands of words, like I'm creating thousands of queries to my server at the same time, almost at the same time, which may or may not be good, which I'll talk about a bit later, I guess. But another alternative, so this looked like a, complicated with the map and everything. There is future.for each. So whenever you're writing something for each, if it feels like, oh, this will take some time, just write instead of words.for each, just write future.for each, or for each, future.for each. Give the words here and give your function as the second. Okay. It's very, very similar to the other. Let me open the comments. Okay. It looks very similar to one we have below. Of course, you have to await again. Because it returns your future. The sentences, yeah. So these are dealing with multiple items. And, I made a lot of my Stackoverflow points about this, both in JavaScript promises and here. Yeah, so be careful when you're doing functional programming and multiple things, and then async, when they get together, it's easy to make mistakes. Again, multiple items and async, you can spawn all of them with the future wait approach, or future.forEach approach, which is the same thing. Or you can spawn them in chunks if you want to prefer that. You can put 5 of them in a list, say future wait on that, and then get 5 more from the list, future wait on those 5. You can do something like that, chunked uploads or something, if you don't want to destroy the server. Or you can spawn them one by one, right? That was my initial thing. My initial for loop was posting one word, waiting for that, adding it. Posting the other word, waiting for that, adding it. Posting the third word, waiting for that, right? So these are one by one, serialized. But the others are parallel. I'm spawning all of them, posting all of them, and then waiting for all of them to complete. At some point, when everybody's complete, I continue. So these may happen in wrong order, possibly, depending on the network situation. If you want them in the correct order in the server, you should do this with the for one by one. So you should be aware of all of these things as you deal with multiple items. Okay, async in Dart is great. What about Flutter? And I'm running out of time slowly. So async and Flutter, you should think of it like this. There's no magic code, again. This is just like user inputs. It's like somebody pressing my buttons, okay? Somebody writing something and pressing a button. It's not the user, but it's something else, okay? Start something, that something will click on my functions later. And I have a Flutter project created for it. And let me bring the simulator and let's start this one. Yeah, I like to start in debug mode in case I have exceptions and I want to put breakpoints. Okay, soon it will start. In the meantime, I can arrange my windows a little. No, that was good over there. Okay, I have again, there was a question earlier about main being async in Flutter. Run app starts the Flutter business, so we usually don't touch that, but it's nice to have the main. And I have a main, my homepage, etc. from the sample app, and I have a list view of things that take me to different pages. So these 2 extra hellos are these bye-bye. Okay. And I have a bunch of pages. Async is like pressing a button is my first one, which I believe is page 1. Yeah, let's just close this. Yeah. Okay, so it's page 1. I started, so in init state, as you know, in Flutter, there's init state. And this happens when your widget is first added to the widget tree. And this is where you start things like downloads and things like that. I usually have an async async init kind of function, which actually returns a future, but we ignore. So this basically is, after init state, I'm starting a bunch of things. So here I start something, and for 10 items, I call the add post, and then wait for 1 second. So this is like, it's pressing the add post button every second. I'm saying this because I also have a floating action button that calls add post when I press it. Okay, so the floating action button is calling the add post. Async work is calling add post. Both of them are calling add post. So this is just like pressing a button is the idea that I talked about. And what does add post do? It calls set state, so it's changing the what's being printed, the data that's being displayed on the screen. I'm getting post length, creating a new post with that ID, and that ID has the content also. So let's see that. Async is like pressing a button. As you can see, the async task is adding one by one, but as I press, I'm also adding, okay? So it's like somebody pressing this button, okay? Who is that somebody? It's the async task that I created that I spawned during my init state. Apparently I pressed it for 6 times or 7 times. So this async work is like somebody pressing the button. Whenever time comes, he presses the button for me. Okay, I also press this button, he also presses the button. So if you start your understanding at this level, everything makes more sense. Otherwise, there's some magic involved. No, it's not magic. You just start something, it presses my buttons, it calls my functions when it's time. Okay, so there's an issue which may not be mounted anymore. Let's see that issue. Back, start again. Okay, I go back before finishing it. And what happens? Oh, error, mistake, exception. Oh my God, I want to cry. People get into that situation. I also do, of course. Oh, there's an exception. What am I going to do? No longer appears in the widget tree. Set up called after this pause. Okay, this is one of the exceptions, one of the few exceptions that you can ignore, in my opinion. I don't know if a lot of people agree with me. Let me explain what happened. So what happened? Async work function. This is just a Dart function. It doesn't care about Flutter. Who cares? I'm just a Dart function. I'm just an async Dart function. I will execute. I don't care if you go to another screen. Nobody told me otherwise. Nobody can tell me otherwise because there's no such thing, right? So I'm being executed. I'm adding a post. I'm waiting. I'm adding a post. I'm waiting. And the user happened to go to another page. So this page got out of the widget tree. So this is not in the tree anymore. This widget is not valid anymore, but this function is still executing. So when we go to add post set state, then the set state sees this. It says, okay, you're telling me to set state, but I'm not in the screen anymore. You're doing something wrong. He's trying to tell me. And he's throwing an exception so I don't continue, because it doesn't make sense to continue this thing that assumes it's on the screen, right? Big thing. I was thinking, why are they, why just not ignore it, etc. Throwing an exception is the correct thing, right? And it's fine, because this code is not supposed to execute anymore. There is no button to press. Don't do that anymore, it says to me. And it's fine, okay. Exactly what you would like to do. So don't try to fight it, is my suggestion. You can safely ignore it, is my suggestion. If there is data to the contrary, please let me know. Or you can place an, if you really don't want to see any exceptions, you can place an if not mounted return between each await and set state, because after the await, the user can go away. Between the await and set state, after await, before set state, place an if not mounted return. Or even easier, because this is work, this is a chore, just create a set state if mounted function, do find replace in your code, just call set state if mounted instead of set state. And here, don't do the set state if it's not mounted. I explain it in another video, which I said in my Twitter, you can find those. Yeah, so this is fine, like I said. But if you want to be clear of any exceptions in your code, you can try to fight it, of course, but it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's saying stop to that code, which is good. So a lot of, some questions in Stackoverflow. Let me do something async before the page shows, please. Can I do that? Before the page shows, I want to check login. No, you cannot do that because you already navigated to this page. The page has to show. You should honor the fact that it is currently loading. You can show loading progress indicator, and then once you have the data, you can do set state to do the rest. And I have my page 2 here. Let me run that. It's loading. So this is that error. I'm not doing anything. I have a list of posts, and in my async init, I'm refreshing the posts, which is loading the post and doing set state to posts. So posts is initially null. And where do I use it? I use it over here. I'm using it in a list view. This is null, so I'm momentarily getting that until it is not null, right? So what can I do? I can do posts. So I cannot do something before the screen show. Screen has to show. It doesn't care about your work. Posts is equal to null. Center circular child. Okay. So now, when I come back to here, something posts. It is null. If it's null, show that. Otherwise, let me see. Type error. Oh yeah, center in list widget. Yeah, children. I said sorry. It should have been outside. Body. Yeah. If it was child, it would be fine. Yeah, now you saw the circle progress indicator and then that, right? So this is what you do. Either or you can also have a is loaded. Yeah, so you can have here is loading. ball is loading. And then you can, in your refresh posts, you can say set state is, or you can initially have is loading true also. Because, or yeah, I'll just say false. Null, I'll work with null. Is loading true, and then I will do it in a try. What happened? So I will do it in a yes, so twice. Try. Finally, because why? Even if there's an exception, I don't want is loading to stay true. This is better than the post null check. It's loading false. Okay, and then where I use posts, I will say is loading true. Equal true check. I'm not saying just is loading because what if it's null? With the non-nullables, it's going to be better about this. Yeah, is loading and works just like I did earlier. Okay, so I'm honoring the fact that it's loading and then setting the set state when I have data show. A nullable future can double as an is loading variable. Initially null started it becomes null when the job is done, set back to null. So that's also possible. That's a pattern that you can use. I have a future of post list, and I am in the refresh posts. Initially it's null. I'm setting it to load posts, the result of load posts, which is going to be a future. So I'm initially setting it to a future, and then I'm setting, loading, and then setting the posts to the post variable, and then I'm setting it to null when I'm done. So this future object is also doubling as, hey, I'm doing something. Okay, and when I building, if it's not null, I'm doing the circle progress indicator. If it's null, then I'm showing, because if it's null means that it is done for me. So this is page 3. Let's look at the page. And it just works. Nothing much to say there. So this is one pattern that I sometimes use. Dialogues and navigator are async. So this may be a surprise for some, or this is like, oh, why didn't I think about that kind of thing? You can await on the pushes that you do for navigators and dialogues. For the pushes or show dialogues, you can do await, sorry. For pushes in navigator, show dialog, for dialogues, you can await on them to get the result that open thing returns with pop result. So let me do that. Let me go to my main. And for my page 3, as you can see, this is awaiting on a navigator push. And I wrote int here earlier. Normally it's like this. But you can click here, you can see that, oh, this is a typed thing, generic thing. You can leave it as is, but I like to say, okay, this will return me an int. And then I can do assign it to a local variable, a type annotation, yes, great, int, and print I was returned on page 3. And then in page 3, I will do, let's say, any post that you tap on. I will do navigator of context pop, and I will give my result here. Or yeah, I could do p.id, whichever one I selected, right? So this is page 3. I go to page 3. I select this one. It says future 7 was returned. Go to page 3. 1 was returned. Okay, whatever the ID is, it is returned. Okay, so these things are what are we doing? This is very powerful actually. In my main, I'm saying, okay, go to that page. That page will return me something. That page does some work, and it has a result that it creates for me, and I get that. Okay, so this is very powerful. You can do that for dialogues and navigators. There's also future builder, stream builder, widgets that take care of async for you. So you get a future, you get a stream, you give it to that widget, it takes care of you. We were taking care of it ourselves, but it takes care of you. I think page 4 is with the future builder. I'll try to be quick here. I have a post future. I am giving it to what? Yeah, I'm giving it to this future builder, and builder FB is called. I'm giving it to this future builder, and then it calls as that future state changes. It's okay, I'll be quick. It doesn't have data. It can be error or waiting. If it has data, I have this really built function that I usually create to make use of it, just to avoid the boiler. This is boilerplate. This is actual code, right, for me. And one thing to note here is that this post future has to be obtained in advance, right, in my in somewhere else. So you don't do load post. You shouldn't put your load posts over here. Okay, why not? Because with every refresh, with every rebuild, you will do another query to the server. So this works just fine. And so I want to say posts future, where I get the posts future. Yes, load posts. So let me say, right. So initially it's going to be only one. One page feature builder. It's just only one. But if I put that load posts over there instead of the post future, and if I have something that does a refresh, then as you can see, there are multiple ones, and every refresh, I get another XP. There can be multiple if you have animations, etc. Refresh a future builder, you just reassign the future with set states. And there is an unexpected await behavior. I didn't have time for it, but I welcome you to check it out. This shook me to my core. So sometimes you can be malicious to create weird features. Please check that out if you have time. Happy async programming. I have a company that I'm running. We are building mobile applications. And if you have questions, this is my email. Also, this is my Twitter handle, Alankus. You can find me. If there were questions that I missed, I think yeah, this future delayed duration seconds. Yeah, we normally don't create that. This is just for me to be able to create a dummy future, really. We don't really do that normally.
I think you can join our viewers at Spatial Chat and answer their questions there. I think that would be a great solution.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this time.